when we decided that there would be a coin flip and that we would not know on the night until the coin flip which one of us would be playing Richard. I think the thing that interested us both was that it could be a different show depending on who won, I guess, if you want to say that. But in terms of that, we did not want to set it in a way that either we would have to make the same choices or that we would have to make opposite choices. We wanted to allow it to be whatever it was. Christina has set up a rehearsal process in which she will oftentimes talk to one of us before the scene is rehearsed and talk about need, objective, whatever, and then essentially go in without the other actors knowing what your choice is. And then if there's a long enough scene, I think this week we have, on Monday, Kevin is called, on Tuesday I'm called, so neither one of us will see what the other one's choices will be. I'll be in on Tuesday, so the actors I'll be working with will know what Kevin's choices were and sort of know how that happened, but they won't know what I'm about to do, and I won't know what he did.
I was never worried that we would end up with the same show both ways. I always had the feeling that even if Aaron and I essentially made the same choices in terms of what our characters had done in the past, whether Richard was involved in Gloucester's murder or whether Bolingbroke was, when he made the decision to go for the crown. Even if we made the exact same decisions, I felt that our performances would be very different just because we're, I think, very different actors and we have different approaches. And so I thought that was going to be a win no matter which way it happened. But from what I have seen during our rehearsal process, I think Aaron and I have made some very different choices about what the events in the play mean to our characters, and that's created some real differences for some of the other cast members too. So in many ways, a lot of our actors are having to prepare two completely different roles.
And there can be separate blocking, and in some scenes there's the same blocking, some of it's completely separate. So it really is a different show. Yeah, they have to know that if I'm Richard, then they're stage left, and if he's Richard, then they're stage right, and sometimes they have to stay still, sometimes they have to move. And it's a completely, I wouldn't say, there are a few scenes where we have there's set pieces that get brought on, and that's going to be in the same place. But in terms of movement within the scene, yeah, there's differences between what worked when we, in other words, it wasn't work with one actor until it's right and then make the other one copy that. It was completely starting from scratch the next night on when you use the other actor. And so it's interesting too, because there's some scenes that we're both in, and so we know exactly what the other one is playing in those, but in the scenes that only one of us are on stage, we literally haven't seen what the other one is doing.
Richard II is a play set at a transitional period where we're moving from the divine right of kings to a more practical, on-the-ground politics. It's a transition from the medieval to the modern in a lot of ways. It's interesting that many of the famous Middle Ages poets like Chaucer and John Clanvow were writing when they were in Richard's court, and once Henry IV becomes the king, there seems to be a gap where there wasn't as much in the arts happening. There was maybe more of a focus on conquest again, which is a big issue in Richard II. He's spending money, he's not conquering and bringing money into the kingdom the way his father had done, or his grandfather had done. So there's that aspect, and I think it's also interesting that Henry IV is, from what I've heard, the first king of England who spoke English as his native tongue. I guess after 1066.
Yeah, there's a dispute between Bolingbroke and another noble named Mowbray. which seems like a small thing, but because of the way that Richard handles it, it affects the stability of the English crown for several hundred years. See, if you are looking at it and uninterested, nothing really happens. But if you understand what's really going on, or like baseball, same thing. It's not just about what happens. It's about all the many different ways that it could go depending on what happens next. So what it's about is when Kevin says it's about divine right versus real politic, what you have one philosophy that says you have God in heaven, you have the king, you have subjects, you have animals, and you have the land, and everything is in its place, and God is in heaven. And therefore, if I have a dispute with someone and I'm in the right, then God will guide my sword, and I will slay the other person in a duel, and that's how it will be settled. On the other hand, you have more like how politics are today, which is that there's a lot of popularity in politics that come into play about who is king and who's able to maintain the crown. And this is the tipping point between those two eras, where you find that the actions of an individual and of groups can affect who holds the crown.
Our director is Christina Gutierrez. She has, I think, an unusual directorial approach for verse plays, in that not only is there a lot of focus on the verse, but we also do a lot of prior events improvisation. So we will improv things that happen immediately before a scene, sometimes improv the scene itself, and in those cases you just have to throw the verse away. It's very text oriented, so the verse is very important, but then there's also this other facet where we spend a lot of time talking about our motivations, what's going on in this scene for everyone that's involved. It's just an approach, sort of a holistic approach, touch all the bases and try to use all of the tools that we can think of just to get the best performance and the truest version of the play.
The play is at the Curtin Theater, which is west of Highway 360 in Austin on Richard Garriott's land. It plays Thursdays, Fridays, and Saturdays from February 21st through March 9th.
The Curtain is a small-scale recreation of the Globe, or an Elizabethan theater. It's down on the shores of Lake Austin. It's open air. It's lit by torches. At night, it is incredibly beautiful. It's my absolute favorite space that I have ever played on, and I was so thrilled that we were able to get it for this show. And many, many thanks to Richard and Letitia Garrett for letting us use the space. I think it's magical, and if you haven't seen a show at the Curtain, whether it be this one or any show that you can, you should definitely see a show there.